Welcome back, everyone. I'm Liz Quirantes.
I'm Jim Grimes. It has been a whirlwind 24 hours here in West Palm Beach.
An attempt on the former president's life, the massive law enforcement response that followed, and tonight the latest on the investigation into the suspected assassin. This morning, the suspect, Ryan Routh, went before a federal judge in downtown West Palm Beach. He's being held on 2 gun-related charges as prosecutors look to keep Routh detained while they continue the investigation into the more serious crime, that, of course, the planned assassination.
Shortly after the Secret Service took shots at Routh, he got into his car, raced away from the golf course. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office put out an all-points bulletin. They thought he would be heading north, and you're looking at the newly released body cam footage of Routh being arrested by Martin County deputies. Massive response over on I-95 as they took him down, placed him in handcuffs. The sheriff says he was unusually calm during the arrest.
The investigation into the incident is being led by the FBI with the help of the U.S. Secret Service and the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. You're looking at video of FBI agents scouting the outside of the golf course earlier today. Security in the area is still tight. The sheriff asking everyone to continue avoiding South Congress Avenue and Summit Boulevard for the time being.
We have team coverage tonight surrounding the second apparent assassination attempt on the former president.
We begin with CBS 12 News Chief Investigator Mike Magnoli, who's at the sheriff's office where the latest news conference just wrapped up. Mike?
Hey there, everybody. This news conference gave us a lot of information into where things stand with this investigation and what will be happening in the days ahead. The acting director of the Secret Service was here, a special agent in charge from the FBI, Sheriff Bradshaw, the U.S. attorney for this area. So a lot of details revealed here, certainly not answers to every question, but I want to play some highlights for you here, sort of some key moments from this news conference. First up, we're going to hear from that special agent in charge from the Federal Bureau of Investigation about search warrants that are going to be executed in the days ahead. Listen.
The warrants include a video recording device, subjects' cellular devices, a vehicle, and other electronic devices located at previous known addresses. We are coordinating with the United States Secret Service to complete numerous interviews of agents on scene. We have also interviewed 7 civilian witnesses at the scene, and that is just the beginning.
Remember, this suspect had a GoPro camera in his sniper's nest on the perimeter of the golf course. So what might have been on that GoPro camera? What other footage is inside of it? That's one question here that we will be keeping an eye out for in the days ahead. And what about the motive? What might have been behind this attempted assassination on former President Trump? Listen to this.
Cellular data shows that the subject was in the vicinity of the golf course roughly 12 hours before the engagement with the United States Secret Service. Our investigative teams conducted a neighborhood canvass in an effort to collect and obtain relevant video footage. The subject had an active online presence, and we are going through what he posted and any searches he conducted online. In addition, we're going through media reports and public statements he made that he wanted to recruit Afghan soldiers and others to fight for Ukraine.
That's noteworthy because former President Trump was asked about that at the debate, and this is a cause that this suspect seems to be very involved with. He's even given media interviews about the war in Ukraine. Finally, here, a soundbite from the acting director of the Secret Service about the atmosphere that is surrounding former President Trump as we head towards the election. The stakes have never been higher. Listen.
Yesterday afternoon, this country was reminded of the heightened and dynamic threat environment the United States Secret Service and its protectees face on a daily basis. Immediately following the assassination attempt of former President Donald J. Trump on July 13th, the Secret Service moved to increase assets to an already enhanced security posture for the former president. In the days that followed, President Biden made it clear that he wanted the highest levels of protection for former President Trump and for Vice President Harris. The Secret Service moved to sustain increases in assets and the level of protection sought. And those things were in place yesterday.
They were in place, but still, somehow this suspect was able to get into that position and wait for 12 hours. Liz and Jim, I did ask officials today if he acted alone. Did he have any kind of help? They say so far in their investigation, it appears that he was by himself in this. Send it back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Mike. Let's turn now to the federal gun crimes charges the suspect, Ryan Routh, is now facing. Our Victoria DeCardenas joins us with what happened during Routh's first appearance today.
This was a very quick hearing at the federal courthouse in downtown West Palm Beach this morning. Some reports saying it lasted less than 10 minutes. Right now, Ryan Routh is facing 2 charges, which is allowing authorities to keep him in custody. And as this investigation continues, more charges could arise as investigators learn more about the days and hours leading up to his arrest. Ryan Routh appeared at a federal courthouse in West Palm Beach Monday morning for his initial appearance following his arrest Sunday. Reports describe him wearing a blue jail jumpsuit, his arms and legs shackled, smiling and laughing as he spoke with his court-appointed attorney, Christy Militello. The U.S. attorney filed 2 charges against him: possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. The Department of Justice confirming Routh was armed with a loaded SKS-style rifle with a scope, 2 bags, and a backpack when Trump's Secret Service detail spotted him.
And there was also a GoPro on the fence there where he was intent on filming what was going on.
Local gun shop owner Alex Schkopp showed us a similar style rifle. This one, an AK-47, and says the serial number is normally etched on the side of the gun.
A normal person would never take the serial number of the gun.
Schkopp says AK-47s don't usually come with scopes, but that someone who knows how can easily modify the weapon to add one, making it more effective from a distance.
So the scope is improving the shooter's capability of being more accurate at a longer distance. So the gun has its own capability, and then you have a person's capability. So optics increase the person's capability to shoot at longer distance.
Making him a more accurate shot.
Making him much more dangerous and making him more accurate, correct.
Routh is a convicted felon, so simply having a gun is a federal crime. And the fact that the serial number had been eliminated to make the weapon untraceable is also a felony offense. Together, on those charges alone, he could face up to 20 years in prison. And again, more charges are expected. On Sunday, Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg said we can expect to see charges coming from his office. But this morning, he says this now falls under the jurisdiction of the federal government. A short time later, Governor DeSantis told reporters in Orlando he is going to launch his own investigation. So we're going to see how that will play out. For now, Ryan Routh is facing 2 charges. He's expected back in court on Monday for a bail hearing and then again in 2 weeks for an arraignment. Reporting in downtown West Palm Beach, Victoria DeCardenas, CBS 12 News.
The investigation into this apparent assassination attempt is just beginning. CBS 12's Al Pefley continues our team coverage tonight. He's outside Trump International Golf Course over in West Palm Beach with more on what the FBI is doing right now, and now we understand that the road is still closed.
We spoke to a former FBI agent who says it may take authorities weeks or even months to get to the bottom of this, but he believes that federal authorities will be able to determine when Ryan Routh, the alleged gunman, started to formulate this plan to try to assassinate Donald Trump here at his West Palm Beach golf course.
And so at the end of the day, this individual is a deranged individual.
Former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan, now a criminal defense attorney in Palm Beach Gardens, says in his view there are 2 main things the FBI is doing right now: to collect and process as much evidence as possible against Ryan Routh, and also to determine if he had any help planning the apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
So they'll go back and they'll look at his digital footprints, meaning his cell phone, his email communications, his social media postings. There's going to be a lot of effort to execute a lot of search warrants, a lot of subpoenas. If I was the lead case agent, anybody who had access to the president within the last 72 hours, I would make a demand to have everybody turn over their phones. I would be going through their phones for their text messages.
He says the FBI will get Ryan Routh's phone, find out what cell towers it pinged off of, and work backwards to look where he was in the past days or weeks.
I have no doubt that they will be able to piece this puzzle together, back together, and be able to tell you with precision as to where this unfolded, where it started, where he stopped and refueled his car. He stated what hotels, who he interacted with.
He says the FBI is also no doubt concerned how Routh, a convicted felon, got the gun.
That is very troubling and concerning to how he was able to get access to be in possession of that firearm.
Kaplan says even though the serial number was obliterated on the assault rifle that Ryan Routh had, he feels because of scientific advancements and various techniques, authorities will be able to recover enough of that serial number to determine where the gun came from. In West Palm Beach, Al Pefley, CBS 12 News.
Law enforcement tracked Routh down in Martin County, about 40 miles north of West Palm Beach.
Yeah, deputies had spotted his car as it was heading down the highway near Martin County.
Treasure Coast reporter Dylan Huberman spoke with Sheriff William Snyder today about what transpired after that.
The sheriff tells me every available deputy in the county was immediately mobilized. The sheriff's office had someone stationed at every exit in the county, and one of the deputies spotted the suspect's vehicle near the Martin Highway exit. They followed him for about 2 miles until they could pin him in.
Driver, take 2 steps to your right. Take 2 steps to your right.
This was the scene Sunday afternoon just before 2 p.m. Martin County deputies yelling commands to Ryan Routh, the suspect in the apparent assassination attempt of the former president at Trump International Golf Club. The entire sheriff's office was on the lookout for Routh after receiving an alert from Palm Beach County.
He was smart. He was just driving with the flow of traffic. Yeah, I think that he may have thought he got away with it. Of course, he couldn't have known that there was a witness who really did the right thing, took a picture of him, took a picture of the tag.
That description and license plate is the reason one of the Martin County deputies was able to spot the vehicle on I-95 North near the Martin Highway exit.
Once we saw that vehicle and got the tag, we were locked on. We had a green light. There was no backing down at that point. There's nothing he could have done that would have shaken us loose. He could have fired at us. He could have driven that car as fast as it went.
According to the sheriff's office, the witness in West Palm Beach was flown to the scene on the interstate in Martin County, where that person identified Routh as the man they saw near the golf course. Sheriff William Snyder says despite that, though, he already believed they had the right guy, simply because he had nothing to say.
He was not asking any questions like, what's going on? There's cops everywhere. There's men with rifles. There's a helicopter. I-95 is shut down. Why no questions? And I looked at him, I thought, yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy they're looking for, and sure enough, it was.
The sheriff says Routh didn't make any statements to deputies, and he and his vehicle were turned over to federal authorities. In Martin County, Dylan Huberman, CBS 12 News.
Well, we also learned during that news conference today that the president's outing to go golfing that morning, it was unscheduled, and everyone is asking how Routh knew the president would be there that morning.
CBS 12 News I-Team Chief Investigator Mike Magnoli joins us again now with a look at that angle. Mike?
How the heck did this guy know to be there? Well, we didn't hear any answers from the Secret Service about that, didn't hear any answers from the FBI, so there are 2 possibilities. Either they don't know yet and they're still trying to figure it out, or they know, but they don't want to say at this point. In any case, as you guys were saying, these golf outings aren't out of character for the former president. He does them all the time. Have a look at this. Former President Donald Trump is an avid golfer. When he's home in Palm Beach County, golf and a meal at one of his clubs is something of a Sunday tradition. Trump has 3 golf courses in Florida. Trump International is the closest to Mar-a-Lago. When he plays, whatever course he's on is partially shut down to members. So right now the I-Team is trying to determine if other golfers are told in advance that their round may be affected by a Trump visit. That could certainly be a security issue. And when Trump is going to golf, an armored vehicle goes to the course. The sight of this armored car and an increased law enforcement presence in the area might give a would-be assassin at least a few hours heads up. Now, Mr. Trump was at a rally in Las Vegas on Friday night and in Utah on Saturday. Trump's plane left Salt Lake at 7:15 p.m. In our area, the FAA and other officials alert the media when Trump will be back at Mar-a-Lago because of airspace restrictions and road closures on Palm Beach. Now, the campaign website had no public events posted for Sunday, and as far as we know, Trump's golf partner, Steve Witkoff, didn't post anything on social media that he'd be golfing with Trump either. Certainly, investigators are looking into how the suspect knew to be in the bushes along the course as Trump was playing. And given this is the second attempt on Mr. Trump's life, the Secret Service is likely advising that anything he makes a habit might need to stop. Okay, and we will keep asking these questions in the days ahead. I suspect there'll be a lot more developments. We're live at the Sheriff's Office tonight. I'm Mike Magnoli, CBS 12 News.